All right, Jack. Hello. It'll focus in. There he is. There he is. How are you doing? Yeah, you are focused. It takes like a second. It takes a beat for it to like acknowledge through the guest star. Isn't guest star kind of cool?
Pretty awesome. Yeah, I never knew about this functionality with Twitch, and I was like, that's pretty freaking neat that I can just pop on. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's pretty
like
great.
it's probably, I don't know. I don't think it's still in beta, but yeah, it's really easy. We were doing Discord before for my plus ones, and this has just been such an easier process. So,
Yeah.
yeah. How are you doing?
Doing good. Just been like I told you, I've been popping around, just been traveling a lot and just kind of relaxing, but staying busy. Staying busy
Yeah.
as always. It's been a really fun and busy summer so far. So yeah, doing pretty good.
Heck
Doing pretty
yeah.
good.
Yeah, the summer's early. It's only been like, 15 days of summer? It is early for us. It is
It
early.
has felt like such a long summer too, which is crazy.
Oh, you
Yeah.
got lots more. So, for those of you who do not know you, who are
Mhm.
you? What do you do? Can you give us a little intro about what you do in the industry and what you did with Annie and the AI?
So my name's Jack. Um, I am a writer and narrative lead. Basically, my first game was Annie AI, and basically what that is, if you want to give you a full details, I basically write video games and then I do voice direction. So basically, I'm with the story from the very conception of it, like the basically the creation of the story, all the way to the end when we're actually like what you consider shooting in most mediums, but we're recording and like actually directing the scenes and basically kind of like the captain of like the story is the best way to put that, I think.
I love that. The captain of the story. And so I want to know how you got started. I know you went to school,
Mm-hmm.
for film.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you get started in the industry and get to where you are at now?
It's such a long journey. It's crazy. So I went to God. So out of high school, I went to Santa Barbara City College. Went there for 2 years. I was gonna go do computer coding, and I took one class, and I was like, I hate this. And I just gritted my teeth, got through it that semester, and I was like, I need to find something else. And like on a whim, I was like, I guess there's like I heard from some people's like, oh, the film class is so easy, it's so fun. And I was like, well, like I mean, I like movies. And I just kind of sat down in that class the next semester and I was just like completely transfixed. We were watching all these movies and they weren't like just like the Avengers and like really prototypical blockbusters. It was like really niche films like from Japan, Iran, and all these different places. And I just remember watching some of the movies and how the professor explained the breakdown of story and camera movements and all these things. I was just like, okay, this just feels right. This like I don't want to leave. I want this class to be 4 or 5 hours. It's only an hour and a half, but I want it to be longer. And I was like, I gotta trust that feeling. So after that point, I was like, screw it, let's just go do film. And after that point, I did CC for 2 years, or SBCC for people who aren't from Santa Barbara, for 2 more years, and then basically from there transferred to Long Beach State, studied producing, and I had another snafu where I was like, I don't really want to produce because I was so interested in the idea of producing, and I had a lot of people in my periphery who were producers, and they were like, oh yeah, if you just do that, you can come join us. And I was like, okay, cool, kind of being like guided in. And that was kind of the plan. I was like, go be a producer, go produce in Hollywood, go produce TV, go be a line producer and do all that. And I got halfway through like what they consider like producer school at Long Beach State, and I was just like, I freaking hate this. And I was just like, oh crap. And I was like kind of like panicking because I was like in my second to last semester as a senior. And on once again on a whim, I was like, I guess I'm just gonna crash a screenwriting course. And literally, I sat there, looked at the entire roster, and I was like, let's just take the hardest class, see what happens. And I walked up to the professor and I was like, can I just crash the course? He's like, this is advanced 3, right? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. And he was just like, okay, you can sit here. And I just sat in the entire class and it was crazy. Everything made sense.
Mm.
Everything. I was answering questions. I was going for it. It's not like a show off thing. It's just everything in my brain. I've never felt something click in my brain so well up until that point. And I was like, I'm in the most advanced class. I haven't taken the stuff before it, and I'm getting it, and I'm really picking up on it. And I was like, this is right. This is what it's for me. So from that point, I finished up college. I moved back home for about a year, kind of preparing myself for the industry. Then I moved out to LA and just started PAing and with the plan of like writing for television. And I ended up on shows like Lucifer and a show called Black Monday and a fantastic show you all should watch called Corporate. I was a PA on that, and that is one of the best shows imaginable, and Comedy Central buried it. It's amazing. But I PA'd a bunch and it was great. And, I was always trying to kind of pursue that career as a TV writer. And at a point, I was doing pretty well. I had a pilot go out on the town and it got some reception from agencies and other places. And I was getting feedback and I was like, okay, great, making some movement. And then it just kind of stopped and people were like, oh yeah, just keep sending us stuff. And I just didn't really feel the feedback, which led me to be like, okay, what else can I do? Like, what other forms of writing can I, partake in? And I was like, well, let's try video games. I love video games. I love Last of Us. I love I've been playing video games since, I was like 7 or 8. And Last of Us was a big influence for me I was like, wow, this is what games can be. Because a lot of game stories aren't that great. And it's like what I think was it John Carmack from ID or id said it was like game first, story second. And that was like biggest MO for the longest time, was like game first, story second. Or this we'll have a level designer do the story. Screw that. How is the game fun? Yes or no? There's no in between. And for me, I was like, there's such an opportunity here to do that. And Last of Us really inspired me, but also other games too. I'm trying to think, like Bully is not the best example, but Bully really inspired me because that world was so enveloping. And there's other games like Psychonauts and Psychonauts 2 and Grim Fandango. I'm a big Double Fine fan. Double Fine is like, Tim Schafer is incredible. So I was like, I see those guys and I go, they're making it happen. They never went into the industry. They did it all on their own. And I was like, well, screw this. I'm not going to wait for the industry. I'm not going to wait for people to kind of give it to me. I have to go, not, take it, but I have to go earn it myself. So I went on Reddit and I was just like, how would I be a game writer? And I did some research and I went on this subreddit called Game Devs Classified, if I'm not slaughtering that name. And I was like, okay, let's go to the search thing and see what game writers do. I went to the search being like writer or like narrative lead, because I knew what a narrative lead was at that point, and nothing came up. And I was like, okay, I have to figure this out. That's great, but also like, what does that even look like? So I just made a post immediately, and I was like, I'm a writer. This is what I've done. This is who I am. This is what I specialize in. If you want my samples, reach out. And I had like maybe like 6 or 7 people reach out, and one of those people is Johnny Fuchs, who's the lead developer for Annie and the AI. And him and I talked, and it was just kind of like a really nice automatic thing where we kind of on the same level. We kind of understood, like, it's his first game, it's my first game. And he was like, there were some pretty serious submissions, but he was like the most committed, the most serious, and like he really had a good head on his shoulders about the entire thing. Because I took other meetings and they were all very nice people, but they just didn't have the level Johnny had of just like, this is my plan, this is what I want, I know I want this, and like I'm going to release this if it, whatever it takes. And I was like, great. But that to me, it really spoke to me. And at that point, for the next like 2 years, basically, we started working together. And kind of now we're here. We expected to kind of launch a small game, and it's just, for what we what it's at least done, and who we've gotten, people like you, Katie, and Clayton, and all these people involved, and Michael and Sandra and the entire team. It's pretty awesome. So it's led us here, and yeah, it was awesome. Sorry if that
no, that's good. That's good. No, that's what you're on here for. Like, we want to hear about your journey and everything. And just bouncing back, just some couple of things for folks who might not know the lingo. What is a PA and what did you do on these sets?
Thank you. Oh man. So PA is a production assistant. A production assistant is basically someone who works in the assistant director department. So basically on a TV set, right? You have all these different departments. You have sound, people who hold like the sound recording equipment. You have the camera operators who literally hold the cameras. And it's pretty self-explanatory, right? They operate the cameras. You have lighting technicians who hold the lights. And then you have the assistant director department, which is basically kind of self-explanatory to a certain degree. They assist the director. They basically help production move along. The first AD is the person who runs that set and makes sure we meet our day. And what that means is that we have 7 pages to film, which basically means 7 pages of a script, which is about 7 minutes of screen time. There's so many layers to this. So if I'm talking too quick, I can slow down.
You're good.
And they basically say, okay, we have 7 pages. We need to accomplish this in 12 hours. And like, that might sound easy to do 7 minutes in 12 hours. That is incredibly difficult. You're lucky to get 4 pages done. And basically, when you are starting out in the industry, the most accessible route into a film set is being a production assistant. It's non-union. It's one of those jobs where you're kind of just grabbing coffee, you're locking down, which what locking down is basically, if you're on a street somewhere and you guys are shooting in a public place, you'll be on a sidewalk, and like if someone's walking on the sidewalk, you can basically be like, hey, don't come this way, we're shooting. And they'll respond a certain way, and you'll basically say, hey, just give it like 5 minutes, and then once they call cut, you can let them through. Or even on like a studio lot, it's like crew members kind of loitering about, just not paying attention, and that happens all the time. It's very normal. And then you'll be like doing like the more cool stuff is like escorting animals and like work like cueing background on set, and that is really fun. Like I got to escort wolves on set, and that was really fun. I wasn't the only one doing it, mind you. I was with like animal trainers like chained to this wolf. It was pretty crazy. But you do like all sorts of stuff. I'll cue people, you'll cue actors. Like I got to cue Don Cheadle a couple times, and that's amazing. Got to work with him like directly, and that is like a really awesome job. There's another side to this whole job. It's the reason why I'm not doing it anymore. But basically, a PA is like this kind of all around entry level job that gets a lot of people their first start in Hollywood.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I know there's a lot of people that aren't familiar, so appreciate that. So, Annie and the AI was your first video game, correct?
Yeah.
So, but it wasn't the first thing that you've written and directed. So you talked a little bit about a pilot. What else have you, I guess, written and directed prior to Annie and the AI?
So, before getting to writing, I was like, I want to be a TV director, because that's how you get into a writer's room. I was a little bit not ignorant, but I just didn't really know what I was doing at that point.
Green. We're all green at some point.
Well, exactly. You're like, let's just try something. And I was like, I directed music videos, and I did a couple small music videos for some artists out in LA, and that was really fantastic. And sorry, 1 second. And then did that, and then I was like, well, I wasn't really passionate. I tried music videos, and I was just like, I worked with some really great artists, and I just didn't like the bureaucracy of it. But also, I didn't feel the passion like I did for writing, because I went through a phase where I was like, I want to be a writer, and then I had a low point in writing where I felt really unmotivated, and I was like, let's go try directing. And I still love directing, but I was like, let's go do music videos because it's so accessible. And I basically went into directing music videos, and I was just like, it just didn't feel right. So I got out of it, and I wrote a pilot called Two Flags Over Texas, which was basically this like political war drama that I've been working on for 2 years, probably since like early 2019, and kind of like really finished it, like my 5th or 6th draft in like late 2021. So about 2 years. And, just start off like anything, just a piece of paper and just some writing and just a story. And the general idea is it's a little bit like American War, and if no one's ever read that book, it's by Omar Al-Khawaja. It's like the idea is like Iraq, if Iraq happened in America. And my idea was like it's similar. It's more referencing that, but also referencing like Battle of Algiers. Basically, if Texas seceded from the Union, and like it's not when they secede, it's like 15 years after they seceded, and the United States is invaded, and it's like kind of the messy baggage of a long-term occupation, right? So the real crappiness of the long-term effects of an occupation on a place. And it over time, because it went through so many phases as a story, and I spent so much time on it. And at one point I submitted to a thing called the Blacklist. And for those who don't know what that is, a blacklist is kind of like this place where you can post your script, and industry members from agencies, studios, other screenwriters, producers as well, especially because they can really make it happen for you, can get access to your script if you score high enough. It's a pay to win thing. I'm not going to hide that. It's very much pay to win, but it can pay off, because it definitely paid off a little bit for me. And basically I submitted it, and I got some really high scores, and I ended up on like the top pilots list for about 3 months. Wow. And it happened twice, and that was great. And the second time, got calls and like, hey, this is great, blah, 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 blah. Got some calls from agencies and some people, and they were like talking to me, and it was great. It didn't really go anywhere. It was more, it all because it was my first thing, right? What happens in a lot of these conversations, and if there's a writer watching, I'm sure they can kind of nod their head and agree, but not all the time, but most of the time is like, they'll usually go, what else do you what else do you have? And that was always the end of the conversation. It's like, what else do you have? This is great. And I was like, this is the only thing I've written. And they're like, that's really great, but you need more. Yeah. And that's usually where I was like, okay, fine. And then that kind of leads to like, okay, see you later. And like, give us a call when you have something else.
Yeah.
And that was where I kind of led me down the line of just like, okay, well, I have to kind of make it happen on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then writing. So writing is your main thing. Like that's what you want to do. You've gone through all these different avenues and different hats, and writing that's your bread and butter. That's where you want to be.
100%.
And now, would you say after working on Annie and the AI, would you want to keep going in the direction of video games, or do you want to kind of like go back and forth between?
I would love to go back and forth. I love it. I love video games. I think there's so much fertile ground there to tell stories in such an engaging way. Like there's so much untouched ground there. And I think I really want to stay in games. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's such a fun process, and seeing the reactions of people to the game was just like next level. You know, you can't really get that in certain mediums. And it's really special. And we can just keep going farther and farther with like interactivity, because you can literally place the person in the character's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about, and like I said, not to overblast Last of Us, because I think it happens a lot.
Don't worry, there's so many people in this chat that love Last of Us, so you are amongst
I'm in a safe place.
Yes, you're in a safe place.
You know, and that game is like, you know, Ellie's a monster. I love Ellie, but she's a monster in that game. And it's like, but you're put in her shoes, and it's like, I don't agree with anything she's doing, but yet I'm doing it. And like that to me is like, I love that. You know, that's just real to me. And I'm like, that is what I love. I don't have to agree with what they're doing. But I'm still doing it. I'm like literally living out this experience. And that to me is really, really cool. But you know, part of me is like, I love movies. That's why I got into it. I love cinema, and I love everything about it. And I'm currently writing a movie right now, and just got done with the first draft. And you know, it's gonna be my baby for the next 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, I would love to do both if that's possible. So
talking a little bit about your process with Annie. So we've had a conversation, and for those of you who, so Jack was the narrative lead and writer, but also voice directed. So I got to work hands-on with Jack, which was awesome. And I know I've already told you this, but you're an amazing director. And if you've if you've watched Annie and the AI, if you've watched me play it, if you've played it yourself, you can hear like the performance is great, because I had an awesome director, and just working with you was so fun. And it was like just easy. It was not stressful. Like it was just a good, fun environment. So major kudos to you.
Thank you.
But with the process of writing Annie, so in those times where we got to work together, you mentioned that it came from your personal life. And however you feel comfortable diving into, you know, whatever you want to share, I would love to, and I think the community would love to hear about, you know, that process and how you created this story based off of your life. Yeah,
totally. You know, so just to preface it, because it's such a kind of like deep as an ocean, because we can talk about this for 2 hours.
Yeah,
we can have a therapy session basically.
And then before you jump in real quick, for folks who haven't played Annie and the AI, can you give us a short little clip of what Annie AI is about before jumping into how you?
The log line for me is like, it's a shut-in programmer who develops an AI that becomes self-aware, and then through that development they kind of discover their emotions more than they thought they ever could, right? That's kind of how I pitch it, is like they're both discovering these emotions they never really thought about.
Cool.
There's a better way to pitch that, but
no, that was great. Okay, just for those of you who haven't played Annie and the AI, if you haven't played it, I think it's !Annie. We'll get you the Steam link. Okay, dive in.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm gonna try and be very specific, but yeah. So I'd say, gosh, 95% of the stuff you see in the story is pretty much sourced from my life. Everything. So Annie's backstory. Now, obviously, I will say this just so I don't want to have any misconceptions. The sister dynamic is a little heightened just because it's a story, right? I want to heighten the conflict a little bit. They were not that crazy. There was definitely intense moments between my sisters and I, but that was a little bit heightened. But most of the stuff is pretty much is pretty on the money, right? So my relationship with my mom is pretty complicated. She left when I was about 10, and she did end up coming back at one point, but I didn't involve that in the story because we didn't have time. But also, just it would have, what we had, there wasn't really much to go on. But there's a lot, so it's kind of like, I'm trying to think where to start with this. But you know, I've always wanted to tell that story of, like, you know, what my experience was with that whole thing, with that whole upbringing. And it was always something that really bothered me. And I was like, you know, I remember talking to Johnny and just being like, because his whole thing was like, I want the game to end on a hug, and I was like, okay, because that was like the first meeting. Like we were talking about story, and he's like, I want this relationship between an AI and the programmer, and I want the story to end on a hug. And I was like, okay, that's great. And I just like, a little selfishly, I was like, I'm going to insert my story into this. And Johnny gracefully let that happen. And if John, I think you are watching, Johnny. If you are, thank you for doing that. That's really, not many people do that. And that's really big of you to do that. And, I just did that. I basically just got my entire life and just said, let's just throw it in there.
So basically Johnny had like the skeleton story that and then you as a writer put your own story and plugged in and created what we now have for Annie and the AI.
Yeah, he's like, end on a hug. I'm like, well, that's a movie. That's a movie. See, I'm talking like I'm in the movies. It's a story that's basically just to me, that sounds like it's about connection, about relationship, right? I'm like, okay, well, great. Where do I go from there?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, let's talk about, because let me back up a little bit. This game is not only about my upbringing with my mom, but it's also about my first relationship, right? Because my first relationship was very troublesome, and not in the way of like, oh, it was very toxic. Not at all. There were some moments we had some problems, but there was a lot of trust issues, especially from my end. And I was learning how to kind of get out of that shell, because obviously with the upbringing of my mom, I had a lot of anxiety and a lot of trust issues, especially around women. It just was really hard for me. And, I had a really hard time, and I had to like learn how to get out of my shell and just really trust someone that they're not going to just disappear on me. But also kind of just believe in myself a little bit, have some confidence. And that's a whole other story we can get into at one point. But that's kind of it. I just kind of threw everything in. And I remember you mentioned the poem. That poem was something I did in college.
So you wrote that already. That was already pre-written. That was a source that you've written, and then you just inserted into the game.
Exactly. So
wow.
I wrote that for an acting class. Because the teacher was like, because she was like really cool. I forget her name. She was amazing. But she was like, before we get into acting, I'm going to have you get in front of the class and do a passion project. And at that point in time, I was just like, I don't know what that means. I don't have a passion. And I was just so anxious, and I just was so self-conscious. And I was like, what does that mean, passion? And I was like, well, let's write up, like, what am I really passionate about? Or yeah, I guess I was passionate about writing, but also I was like, what would be appropriate for something like this? And I was like, let's just write a poem about my mom. And that's what came out.
Wow.
And that's what came out. And it's a little bit edited, not like with the content, but just cut down, because it was longer than that. It was pretty long.
Is there any way can we see the pure unoriginal the original unedited?
It wasn't like there was like stuff in there that was
good.
Just like it was like
specific. Yeah, it just didn't work with.
Like who's gonna get this?
Yeah, it was so good. I remember reading that and just like I started crying. I was like, I mean, it was so well written. You're incredibly talented. And yeah, there's a lot of people in the chat who have played and who have watched, and they're just responding so positively right now, and it's really great. So thank you, chat, for being.
No offense to people, I'm just like I get a little nervous sometimes. So.
Oh no, you're great. No, you're great. This is very like podcast style. Like I don't really interact with them. It's very much on you and whoever the guest is. So no, this is great. But I do look over every so often to see how people are.
I would just be looking over the entire time. Like, just it would be so distracting for me.
Johnny did say Jack did fantastic things with my outline. He really made it so intimate and so special. Thank you, Jack.
Awesome. Thanks, Johnny.
So as we know, you put a lot of yourself into the story. Have any of your family members played this game? And if so, what did they think about it?
No, that's a bridge I have not crossed yet. That's a conversation I got to have with my sisters and then my mom.
Did they know that you wrote it? Do they know it exists?
My sister knows I wrote a game. She said she would buy it. Knowing my sister, she'd probably be like very supportive. I have two sisters. Knowing them, they'd probably be very supportive. There'll probably be conversations, probably clarify. Because I think the one thing that comes up with me is like the anxiety of like, well, how those sisters are perceived as very aggressive and very, not predatory, but just like boundaries, right? How I tried to write them, and I don't know if I completely succeeded, but I tried my best, was like, if you look at it from their perspective, right? Annie's in her room isolated with a dad who needs help, and she's just sitting in her room isolated, not helping. So
Mm-hmm.
of course they're really frustrated. Of course the two sisters are like, she's sitting in a room all day. What the like? Of course we're gonna barge in and tell her what to do because we need to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I tried to make it very fair. I'm not sure if that came off that way, but that was the goal, and that's where a lot of the nerves come with family. I'm like, I will mention it at one point, and I have mentioned it to them, like, hey, I wrote a game, but they haven't really checked it out.
Yeah.
When that does happen, I'll let you know
Yeah.
because
It reminds me, have you seen Euphoria?
I've seen bits.
Okay.
It's fun.
There's a one in chat, maybe you know this what I'm talking about, but there's one episode where one of the characters puts on a play and it's about like their entire family and everything, and like you get to watch the family watch the play. It's very interesting. So it reminds me about that.
I gotta watch the episode now. That must be great.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a really good yeah, it's just very meta, but it reminds me of the situation a little bit. Okay, so if someone wanted advice on basically where you're at writing, writing, directing,
Yeah.
let's say specifically with video games, what would you tell them? Like, how would they get started?
On video games specifically,
Yeah.
One, write as much as you can. I write every day. Even if it's journaling, just get in the practice of it. You have to write. I mean, what I was told from a very early point in my career was like by showrunners who were just like, you need to write every single day. And like, obviously I've had other showrunners be like, that's insane, don't listen to that guy. But like, it is somewhat true. Like, I think you have to be writing a lot. And I try to write 5 to 6 days a week for at least 2 hours just to get it in. And it's like an itch I have to scratch, which is really great. But I'd say that is a big thing. If you want to write, just write. Writers write. That's such a cliche, but writers do just write.
Mm-hmm.
Get used to just putting pen to paper. And if it's just journaling at first, great. That's a great start. Secondly, I've just started this is like, it's like movies, right? Like there's steps in playing a game and watching a movie, right? Like you can watch a movie as like a viewer, or you can watch a movie from a critical standpoint. I would suggest doing that on your own, not around your friends, because you'll see a movie and go, I hated that. And then your friends will just fucking hate you, because it's happened to me. And I see movies and I keep my mouth shut because I have a million things in my head going like, they could have done that better. They could have done that better. They could have switched this scene. They could like keep that to yourself. It won't. But same thing with games is like, see how they set things up on a story perspective, even a mechanic perspective. How do the mechanics support the story? How do the story support the mechanics? Like Prey's a good example of that. And like how that whole intro sequence, and I'm not going to spoil it, but like how everything is set up is really fantastic. And it's very specific. And Arcane Leon did such a good job with that game. And I'm still playing through it. And it's just fantastic. But it just really breaking things down. And like even playing games you don't like. I played in, hopefully no one's a fan of Gears of War 4 because I'm a big fan of Gears of War 1, 2, and 3. But Gears of War 4 is just such a step down from the first three. It's really depressing because I love the first three and they're really great. And it's an interesting story. Marcus Phoenix is this really fascinating war hero who goes through loss. And then you have his son, and it's like the story goes through no beats. It's just like a flat line and these flat characters who just react to things and are like, I'm sad now. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. And that's a great thing is like play games that aren't necessarily great because you can like kind of see what they're doing wrong. It gets you in that critical thinking analysis of like, how can I do this better? Right. That's not everyone's cup of tea. That's my cup of tea. You know, even if I'm playing a game I don't like, I'm like, how can this be better? Because I literally said I played Gears of War and I have a freaking thing of notes being like, this is not good. This is not good. This is not good. How could they have done this better? Like, how could this be better? And hopefully no one from Epic is watching this. I'm sorry. Or whoever did Gears of War 4. No shit on them. It's a very hard thing to do. And I understand with a franchise like that, that's very bureaucratic. That's not cut and dry like an indie game. It's not it's not 3 people talking on a Discord channel. It's like 30 people, and it's a lot of executives and a lot of, higher positions and in politics. And I get it, but that was just my opinion on that game. So I think it's just like practice your writing, keep it simple, really just it's just consistent, right? It's because people think like writing is like, if I do this much, I can get to here and I'll have this and I'll be happy. It's like, no, writing's a war of attrition. It's not it's some war you're going to win. the war never ends. You're gonna be doing this until you die, and that's at least my opinion. Like, I'm not gonna stop writing for the rest of my life, and like, I'm not sure when the success is gonna reach its peak, because I feel really successful in a lot of ways right now, but like it's not really about the end goal. It's about the process for me. And like, if it's about the process for you, then follow that. But if you're like, I want to be rich, I want to like be famous, I want to be like Neil Druckmann, I want to be like the guy from Arcane Leon and with my own band and like start my own studio and do like all that crap, that's great. Those guys are awesome. I love those dudes. I wouldn't necessarily do it. Like, it's not about the fame, it's about the process, and it's about expression. Because if you come with that mindset, you're going to do absolutely awesome things in this industry, and you're going to change it for the better. So I'd just say, yeah, just like I said, to keep it back simple. I'm sorry, I kind of go off on
No,
tangents,
you're great.
Is like, write every day and just have an analytical brain. And like, you can it's good to turn your brain off and have a mental health day and like just play a game because it's a game. But it's always good to have that mathematical look at a game, going like, what are they doing and why? That's it. Just think. So
yeah. And for those folks who are writers, we actually have quite a few writers in the community.
That's awesome.
Writer's block. Like, what is something, because I see it. We have a Discord channel like with the writers, and they talk in there and talk about getting stuck and where to get inspiration from. Like, obviously you pull a lot from your own personal life. Is that typically what you do, or how do you get inspiration to write what you write?
I force myself to write, even when I'm like, I don't want to write. I have to write. And that's come from like a practice of journaling every day. Journaling, I don't want to journal, and I just have to journal. And by the end, I'm like so happy I did.
And is that just like you open your journal and you just start writing whatever you're thinking? So no prompts or anything. You don't you just write. You pen to paper, just start writing. Nice.
This is how I'm feeling. This is what's going on in my life. And that's it. It's not about fixing. It's more, okay, this. I need to like be able to process this correctly.
Yeah.
And it really somewhat trained me to just sit down and write, because a lot of what happened early on in my career was like, I was so hypercritical of my writing, being like, if I write right now, it's not going to be perfect, and it's going to be terrible. It's going to be shitty. And like, once you let go of that, or at least once I let go of that, speaking for myself, it was amazing. It's very empowering, because you're like, of course it's going to be shit. The first draft is always crap. It's not good. It's never going to be good. You have to accept that. And like, how I look at writing is like, you have this big ice sculpture, and at first you're like chipping away. And once you go through your first pass, you're like, this looks nothing like how I imagined it was going to look like. It's pretty bad. And if you like bring your friend over going, hey, check out this ice sculpture, and I'm like, dude, you just hit the thing a couple times. What do you mean? You're like, and you can stop there and become unmotivated and just give up, or you can just keep going and keep chipping away and just really refining that sculpture. And over the next couple of years, it becomes what you wanted it to be. And then people are going, oh, wow, that's crazy. Right. So, with the whole writer's block thing is like, yeah, I get writer's block all the time. It happens all the time. And I'm like sitting there at the scene, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell to do with this. What do I do with this? I have no fucking clue. Pardon my language. Sorry. I don't.
You're okay. You've probably watched my stream enough to know that that doesn't matter.
Okay, good. And, it happens. Writer's block is super normal. It's just about pushing through it sometimes and not getting too critical. And you always can delete it. We don't have typewriters anymore, thankfully. If you want to use a typewriter, go for it. Be my guest. But digital is amazing. So and writer's block is obviously very difficult, but it's just working through it. And if you, a best way to look at it is like, if you just sit down to write, and you sit there in front of your screen for 2 hours, just really thinking, and get like 2 lines of dialogue in, great. That's fine. That's not failure. That's progress. It might be 2 inches, but guess what? It's 2 inches forward, not back. You're not in the same place you were.
We had a writer on on here not too long ago, an author, a novel. I think you might have seen the Life is Strange Stuff story book around. Yeah. And she has a really great a great piece of advice saying, just give yourself a goal every day, even if it's just one word, because you will reach that goal, and just like, and according to writer's block and stuff. So I always thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
you just gotta keep it realistic. Just be realistic with your goals and
Mm.
just try and just sit down. Like I said, you can't be like that was for me. Like personally for me, I was so hard on myself being like, I'm gonna do this and I have to be this. And like if I don't hit this many scenes in a day, I'm a failure. And it's like, and that would just obviously compound in itself. And I would just like get in front of a screen and just stop. I would just like never do it. And now I'll be like, once I let that go, it just flows,
Hmm.
it just comes out. And sometimes it doesn't, but you have to be okay with that. And you have to be patient because like you can't rush good art. And, you know, the best, another piece of advice is like, if anyone's working on anything right now, what I see a lot of people do is like, I wrote 12 scripts this year and none of them did anything. And it's like, well, yeah, because you wrote 12 scripts in a year. That's awesome. That's really cool. But like quality is also a really big thing. Quantity is awesome, I guess, and maybe you can strike a balance, maybe write 6 scripts this year instead of 12. But like how I perceive writing, and this is personal, and maybe someone would disagree with me, but like every time I start a script, and I usually do 1 to 2 projects at the same time, but I'm going to be spending at least 2 years with those things. They're my babies. You're not going to get the good stuff until you really, really peel back the layers and go, what am I trying to say?
Hmm.
Two Plugs Over Texas would not have like gotten me those like calls and meetings if I just did a year's worth of work on it. The extra year really allowed me to like pull back the layers and go, what am I trying to say in this pilot? What am I trying to like propose? What am I trying to tell people when they watch this show? Right.
Mm.
It really allowed me to take time. And same with Annie and the AI, man. Like I really spent a lot of time on that game and just like really was trying to focus down like what is this all about?
Mhm.
So I think just giving yourself time to like it's a piece of art. Treat it like really honor that too. I think if you the more you honor it, the more I think the quality will go higher or at least go up.
Mhm.
So
I love that. And kind of switching gears a little bit here, we'll switch back in a second. But outside of the industry, outside of writing, outside of your what you've done,
yeah.
what are you have any hobbies? What do you like to do outside of it? Yeah.
My well, I can tell you about my day job and then my hobbies. My day jobs, I'm a teacher. I teach over at a high school called Dos Pueblos High School in sunny Santa Barbara, California. Uh, I'm in an engineering academy. It's the bee's knees. I love that place.
And what do you teach exactly?
I teach like web design. It's
Cool.
crazy. It's like a half teaching job where I teach like the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors for one period, and then the other half I'm like doing their web design, like the websites, and then photos and videos, and I do interviews as well, like interview like people for our video content,
Cool.
and I manage all that, and it's a freaking awesome job. I have a good time with it.
Hmm.
But besides that, hobby wise, gosh, I surf and I like to play baseball. I like to stay active. Surfing has been pretty terrible as of late, but I get out there when I can, and then like pretty normal. Just like to read, hang out with my family. Um, yeah, gosh, there's probably something I'm missing, but
Yeah, no, that's cool. I always just yeah, it's nice to see what else you do outside of the industry, outside of your main, your main shtick, and it's cool sometimes to see, what you do to make ends meet while you're following this passion. And yeah, so it's cool. Like the whole teaching thing is really cool. Yeah.
I would also say like those hobbies and like the things you do like outside your writing, right? Is like I was told this piece of advice by a writer who like did some pretty great stuff. His name's Morgan Land. You can look him up. I'm not sure what he's doing. I think he's just doctoring now, like doctoring scripts. And what that means is basically you're given a script and you fix it and you do rewrites for it and you aren't credited. But it's a way to live. It's pretty great. But he wrote The Iceman, and that was a pretty big movie when it came out. Massive cast, and he was the guy who really lit my fire for writing. Like you hear this guy talk, and you're like, I want to be a fucking writer. Period. This guy was awesome, and when he first told me, I didn't believe it, and I thought he was kind of full of shit. That was the only time I thought he was full of shit. And I was definitely wrong, obviously. But like when he told me, he was like, if you want to be a writer, you have to do more things than just write. You have to go live life. You have to like go meet people. You have to see the world, but you also have to like get your heart broken. You have to like put yourself in these really precarious situations and see how it goes. And it's not like go stand on a train track and like wait for a train to hit. Like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but like just go live life to the fullest extent so you can talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I didn't believe that because probably I think it was like a little bit of deep seated fear about that. Cause I definitely felt something when he told me that. And, he was absolutely correct. He's absolutely right. And like the hobbies I have outside, like a big thing is traveling. And like the feature I'm writing is about my experience when traveling. And it's not like just a travel movie. It's like about like codependency and moving on from a breakup. And it's all these things, but it was all sparked through traveling. It was like, okay, like being alone in a foreign country really makes you introspective because you can't really talk to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You have to just kind of talk to yourself. And then the people you kind of end up with are sometimes the people you end up with because they're the only ones who speak English and they're not the greatest sometimes. So back to kind of the previous question is like, if you want to write, just go live life and, put yourself out there and you'll have things to talk about.
I love that. I love that tie-in a lot. I mean, it's funny that you're talking about how you listen to that guy talk and you're like, I want to become a writer. I'm listening to you talk and I'm like, I want to become a writer. I'm not even kidding you. I'm like, you're making this sound like you're making it sound so like nice and fun and just creative and like easy to jump into, which I know it's not. And I'm definitely not a writer. I am far, far from it. But no, I'm just really appreciating, I hope people who are listening are getting inspired as well by Jack talking because I am. And just another thing, another thing to build you up. For Annie and the AI, like when I had gotten those scripts, and I'm pretty sure I told you this, like while we were working together, but you wrote them like as somebody would say them. And the only other time that I've ever experienced that as an actor is working on the Life is Strange games.
Thank you.
Like I haven't, like we get scripts all the time that are just shitty and you can't perform it because it doesn't come out of your mouth properly because it's not something anybody would actually say or how they would say it. But I remember getting the script and then like working with you, doing the voiceover, and it comes so naturally. And like one of those lines, it's at the very beginning of the game where she's talking really fast and it's one of the tutorials, I think. She's like, oh, but you didn't need to do this and like it just works so well, like we obviously work to get that delivery, to perfection, but the way you wrote it made it easy to get there. And so I just wanted to just kudos to you on that.
I appreciate that. That's always a goal too.
Yeah.
So that's really great. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, of course. And then jumping back to Annie again, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but do you guys plan on porting Annie to consoles or continuing the story?
I would say it's a Johnny question.
Yeah, I was going to say.
If I had the money, oh man, I'd be just writing the check right now.
Yeah.
I really would. I would love that. I'd love to be able to play that on my Switch and just like, or whatever, PS4 or 5 now. Sorry, PS5, I'm a gen behind.
It's okay. I don't even have it either.
Just have my PS4 and Xbox One.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't really know to answer your question.
Yeah. And that and the part about continuing the story, like that's exciting to think about. But, would you say that as a lover of film and TV and video games, when it comes to the point where you see something as an end, but you see it get a lot of great reviews, do you keep it as an end or do you figure out a way to continue the story to appease?
I think it's always about story first and foremost. There is fertile ground for a sequel. That's I'm a little burnt out. Sorry, Johnny. That's but there is fertile ground. Because like I said, that game is about my first relationship, and that relationship ended a year ago, and I went through. If you met me, let's see here, it's July 5th, 2023. If you met me in like February 2022, completely different person, absolutely different. And the amount of change I went through in the last year after that breakup is like pretty substantial. I learned a lot about codependency and, relying on myself and independence and all these things. So there's definitely ground there. I don't really know how it would work in a game, but there definitely is.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, like, it depends, like if there's a massive demand and people are like, we want it, we like, like millions of people are just like begging, okay, sure, we can talk about it. But on this level, like we have a lot of people, people love the game and that's really fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
If there's ground, sure. But the game ends on such a nice note. It's like, well, we've kind of explored that relationship. Maybe it's time to try something else. Cause you want to like, as a writer, just write different things. Like
Mhm.
that is a one room drama. I've always wanted to write a one room drama. I'm done. I'm kind of done. I don't know if I want to do it again.
Yeah.
I want to try different things. So, it's one of those things where I'm open to it, but
Yeah.
I like to try new things.
And then is there anything that you can talk about that you're working on right now, or is that all kind of?
With Johnny, we're talking about some stuff. I'll let him.
Hey,
Yeah. Johnny's like, stop,
stop
just stop.
talking, Jack.
He's like, cancel the stream, cancel the stream. No, we're talking right now, and then I am working on a feature right now that
Oh
I
yeah.
plan on doing a short of in hopefully December or January and shooting in Santa Barbara. But besides that, just those two, and that's kind of it. Hoping to write more games, and I'm gonna keep on the lookout, and
Yeah.
that's kind of it.
And if you need another actor for anything,
Oh,
hi. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great to hear. I'm excited to see what you guys are working on. I'm excited to see the short for the feature. Yeah, this has been great. I've really enjoyed having you on here, Jack, so much. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to say? Like anything you would want to promote, or yeah, anything else you have going on?
I'm hoping you can't hear the banging on my roof.
Oh, good.
I don't know what they're doing out there. My niece is getting crazy, I guess.
Oh, good.
I don't know. I mean, just if you haven't played any in the AI, check it out. We worked really hard on it. Katie did an incredible job. Johnny did an incredible job. Michael did an incredible job. Sandra did an incredible job. Everyone did.
Jack did an incredible job.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's an awesome game with a lot of love and a lot of passion behind it. So if check it out, we would love the support. Even if you just give us a tweet, it'd be great. But yeah, that's kind of it.
Cool.
That's kind of it. If anyone from my writing group is on here, which I don't think they are, but if they are, thank you guys, because those guys are freaking awesome. And if you're a writer looking for a writers group, do that. It's the best thing you can ever do, because having that feedback is incredible to have. Like I love that group. They're just the most supportive and amazing people with some of the best notes. So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Jack, I know you are going out and doing some adventures later today. What did you say you were doing again?
Oh, I'm going to Manhattan. So
That's right.
I live in Santa Barbara, but I'm actually currently in New Jersey right now, and I'm about to go across the Hudson to Lower Manhattan.
Ooh,
So
that sounds fun.
see me. Someone's coming by. I don't think you will, but
when he was in New York, say hi to Jack when he's in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, thank you again so much for coming on. It really, really means a lot to me. And I hope that you have a good rest of your day today. Safe travels. Jack is going to Japan in 10 days as well. So safe travels. Yes. I can't wait to see what you come back with, after talking with you about this. Hopefully you have some retrospective times and you come back with another video game script or a pilot. Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. All right. Bye.